Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to AJ 101 Criminal Law Online. And this is going to be your Chapter 9 lecture. And we're going to talk a little bit this evening about dangerous weapons control laws. So we'll look at some of the kind of do's and don'ts, and we'll also talk a little bit about um, some of the misinformation that's out there regarding um, carrying and storing and possessing of not just firearms but dangerous weapons um, as a whole. So as we start to kind of talk about what we're going to go over tonight, um, there are a lot of sections and codes, just like throughout a lot of the other chapters, but even more so when you talk about dangerous weapons and control laws and things like that. So it's good to know that you're not going to need to know every single definition and corresponding code, but again, this is one of those chapters where you're going to want to take the time and kind of read through all of the different weapons that they have and the sections that are corresponding. So they have a whole section as an example, weapons and devices other than firearms or less lethal weapons, and what are they and what are the definitions and all of these different things. So quite a bit of codes in this particular chapter, as opposed to a lot of other chapters that we've gone through. But so Part 6 of the Penal Code contains provisions defining and penalizing offenses relating to the purchase, transfer, possession, carrying, manufacture, importation, or use of specified dangerous and deadly weapons. Now, statutory exemptions are variously made for law enforcement, military, private security, and cinematic or even martial arts personnel. So there are some exceptions for some of these folks. And weapons seized under these provisions that are unclaimed within 12 months are basically considered nuisances and can be sold at auction or destroyed as listed in a couple of penal codes, 18005 and 18275. Law enforcement officers and agencies have no civil liability in state court for any good faith actions in complying with the mandatory seizure and retention schemes of a lot of these different statutes, and you can find some of that information in that same section 18500 of the California Penal Code. So the first thing to start off with would probably be where you might, as a law enforcement officer, encounter not necessarily somebody with a dangerous weapon, but where there statutorily exists things that you need to do at the scene of a particular incident in order to deal with any type of weaponry that you might find. So here we're going to talk a little bit about Section 18250, that is the duty to take custody of weapons at a domestic violence scene. And a little more kind of information here. Any peace officer at the scene of a domestic violence incident involving inflicted or threatened physical assault must take temporary custody of any firearm or other deadly weapon seen in plain view or discovered by a lawful search. Now, if you look back into that statute there, it doesn't say you should, it doesn't say you can. I believe the words were must. Okay, so that is your duty to do that. The officer must give the owner or person in possession a receipt for the weapon under Penal Code 18255 and must deliver the weapon to the department within 24 hours, and that's Penal Code 18260. Now, a peace officer serving a protective order which indicates that the respondent had firearms or ammunition, is required to request the surrender of the weapon when the order is served, and that's Family Code 6389. So if you're serving a protective order, which indicates that that person there had firearms and ammunition, that person is required to surrender that. So the weapon must be held by the department for not less than 48 hours, no more than 5 business days, and then may be returned if not needed in court, and if the California Department of Justice has found no disqualification for the person's possession. Okay, if return of the weapon might endanger someone, a petition may be filed in Superior Court to prevent return of that weapon. If the weapon is a recovered stolen weapon, it must be returned to the rightful owner after released by the court from any type of evidentiary use. So, this is good, important information for us to understand at the scene, especially of domestic violence. So, again, kind of in review, your duty to take custody of weapons at a domestic violence incident, the word is must take custody of any deadly weapon in plain view or discovered by lawful search, held no less than 48 hours, no more than 5 business days, may be returned, but there are some exceptions. Needed by the court, disqualified to have the weapon, further endangerment, or it's stolen. Weapon may be kept by law enforcement if one of the above areas is violated, and law enforcement carries no civil liability, for these seizures when complying in good faith with the law. So that's a little bit of an overview that you might encounter when you're talking about domestic violence scenes. Now we're going to kind of move into what they call destructive devices or explosives and what they are. And we're not going to go through each particular section here, but Penal Code 16460 talks about a destructive device includes any of the following, and that would be like bombs, grenades, other incendiary devices. Any weapon or ammunition greater than 60 caliber, any rocket device greater than 0.60 inch diameter, including launching devices, any breakable device containing flammable liquid with a flash point of 150 degrees Fahrenheit or less, except for commercially produced lightning equipment, any sealed device containing dry ice or chemically reactive substances assembled to cause an explosion. Remember those dry ice bombs that you used to make when you were a kid? Or I don't know, maybe that was just me when you grew up. So there are sections for some of these things. And of course, any bullet containing an explosive agent, well, it's not a destructive device, it's in a separate section. So this is what talks about destructive devices. Then you have explosives. Capable of rapid release of gas and heat, includes dynamite, nitro, black powder, detonators, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, biological, chemical weapons. Section 18710 through 18755 talks about general code violations dealing with possession, sale, transportation, and use. And there's a lot of different type sections that kind of fall into here, and penalties vary from jail wobblers to prison wobblers. So that's kind of the explosive and destructive devices. Now let's look at things that are less lethal. So Penal Code Section 16780 talks about less lethal weapons defined. And a less lethal weapon is one that is designed or altered to propel ammunition, if you will, for the purpose of incapacitating, immobilizing, or stunning a human being through the impairment of physical condition, senses, discomfort, or pain. So designed or altered to propel ammunition, which could be quite a few different things. it includes tasers and stun guns. And section 19405 tells us that it is unlawful to sell less lethal weapons to a person under the age of 18 years old. So there are tasers that are out there, just so you know, that you can lawfully have, and there are, it differs from state to state though, okay? And there are stun guns that are out there that you can lawfully possess, just like pepper spray and things like that, but you have to know your state statutes, and understand too, there's a difference between a taser and a stun gun. Okay, and without going into super detail, a taser is a item that is meant to kind of get someone to do something, meaning not just made for incapacitation like a stun gun. A taser shoots a dart, if you will, at the target, causes that level of incapacitation along with somebody going along with the program, if you will, versus a stun gun is kind of a handheld device where you actually have to touch it to the individual in order to gain some type of compliance through pain or what have you. So just a little bit of a difference kind of between those two. But if you look on page 142 in chapter 9, you'll see a bunch of different things that are listed there. So here we've kind of got a good idea on what less lethal weapons are and so on. So here are some of the things that are actually listed on that chapter 9, page 142. It talks about metal knuckles, or brass knuckles as we used to call them, nunchucks or nunchakas, depending upon how you want to pronounce it, shurikens or throwing stars, stun guns, tear gas, pepper spray, a leaded cane, any object that can be used as a club may be unlawful where the facts show it was possessed as a weapon. So that's People versus Grubb. So just a couple of different things, and I'm not going to walk through each one of these definitions because I think you could take the time to go ahead and do that. Now, as far as the last one goes, the object that can be used as a club, the California Supreme Court has ruled that an ordinary object that can be used as a club may be deemed an unlawful billy or billy club, if you will, where the facts show it was carried for or possessed as a weapon. So this could include a baseball bat, a pick handle, a table leg, a 2x4, or something similar. The legislative intent here, though, the legislature sought to outlaw possession of the sometimes useful object when the attendant circumstances, including the time, place, destination of the possessor, alteration of the object from standard form, and other relevant facts indicated that the possessor would use the object as a dangerous weapon or for a dangerous purpose. So an example, okay, that's listed in People versus Grubb would be a club with a taped handle and spikes on one end, kind of like a billy club. So it was altered. And a police baton carried by someone who is not a police officer could be a billy club, illegal as well under People versus Mercer. So all of these different things that are out there, you need to kind of be aware of. I'm sure that there are some of you in your lifetime that may have carried, some type of baton, if you will, inside your car next to your seat, and it had a tape wrapped around the handle, and maybe even a hole drilled through the handle with a strap so you could hold it. Well, that in essence, okay, it doesn't mean you'll get in trouble, but that in essence shows that it's been altered for a particular purpose and therefore could, okay, fall underneath that section of a billy club or something. So you have to kind of be careful of those kinds of things as well. So that's kind of the club part, and some of those. Now we'll move into like knives and similar weapons. And again, I won't go through all of these, but there's separate sections for many of these, like a belt buckle knife or a cane sword or a pen knife, a dirk or a dagger, Okay, mere possession is not a crime, unlawful only when carrying concealed upon the person. So, I mean, you've seen people before with, you know, some large bladed knives, but they're worn openly in a sheath. They're not concealed upon the person. So a switchblade knife would be a little bit different. So that is a knife having the appearance of a pocket knife. It has to include a spring blade or a gravity knife or something similar, and the blades have to be at least 2 inches long. So switchblades are definitely something that you could you know, be prosecuted for. So just kind of keep that, you know, in mind as well. So again, it's the appearance of a pocket knife and includes those that are like spring blade knives or snap blade knives or gravity knives or similar kinds of knives where that blade can be released automatically or by the flick of a button, pressure on a handle, flip of the wrist, gravity, or any other mechanical type device. So a switchblade knife does not include a pocket knife that opens with one hand by thumb pressure on the blade or a stud to kind of overcome that built-in resistance to opening so the blade doesn't fall open. So keep that in mind. And the dirk and dagger, carrying a dirk or dagger concealed on the person, on your person, is a jail wobbler. So mere possession, again, or sale of a dirk or dagger is not unlawful. It's only unlawful for a person to carry such a device concealed on the person. And the dirk or dagger need not be completely hidden from view to be concealed. Where a fixed blade knife was carried in the suspect's waistband, the court said the mere fact that some portion of the handle may have been visible makes it no less a concealed weapon. A defendant need not be totally successful in concealing a dirk for them to be guilty. So again, you know, keep those things in mind. This offense also requires no specific intent as to its intended use. That means that a steak knife, butcher knife, hunting knife, or other instrument fitting the statutory definition, okay, and carried concealed on the person may, not could be, but may be a dirk or a dagger. And as the court said, quote, a defendant may be guilty of carrying a concealed dirk or dagger without intending to use the instrument as a stabbing weapon. Defendant's intended use of the instrument is neither an element of the offense nor a defense. So just, you know, a little bit more information to kind of help you deal with identifying, you know, switchblades and dirks and daggers and all those kinds of other things like that. So hopefully we kind of went through that and you have a good understanding of that. So now let's move into firearms, because this is typically where you're going to run into a lot of this stuff as a law enforcement officer. And there's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to firearms as well. So first, we're going to look at the short version of firearm defined so we kind of know what it is. It's found in 16-520 of the Penal Code. So a firearm is any device. Okay, let me start again. Any device designed to be used as a weapon from which a projectile is expelled through a barrel by the force of any explosion or another form of combustion. Firearm also includes the frame or receiver or any rocket launcher, or similar device containing any explosive or incendiary material. So that's the definition of a firearm. Now, a concealed firearm you can find under section 16-530, and the terms firearm capable of being concealed on the person, pistol, and revolver include any device designed to be used as a weapon from which a projectile is expelled through a barrel by the force of any explosion or other form of combustion, and having a barrel less than 16 inches in length. So that's the definition okay, of a concealable firearm. So pistol, revolver, capable of concealment, and you've got some information there. Long gun, so we're not going to go through all these. We'll just talk about a couple here and there that are a little more appropriate, especially timing wise. Criminal storage of a firearm, section 25.110 and 25.200. Very important for you to remember, it is a jail wobbler. So to keep a loaded firearm unsecured where it is reasonably known that a child under 18 may gain access to it, if the child obtains the firearm and causes death or great bodily injury to himself or another. It is a misdemeanor if the child causes injury that is not great. It is also a misdemeanor to keep a concealable firearm unsecured where it is reasonably known that a child under 18 may gain access to it if the child obtains the firearm and carries it off the premises, or to fail to secure firearms in a household where a person who is prohibited from possessing firearms resides. That too is a criminal offense. So for you, for this section, criminal storage of a firearm, keeping a loaded firearm unsecured, accessible to children under 18. Now, there are a lot of kids that get into closets, that climb up in closets and end up grabbing a hold of rifles or handguns or things like that. And that is the rationale for locking your firearm with some type of locking device or in a safe or what have you. Assault weapons, semi-automatic weapons unlawful to possess, and other sections that are there like sawed-off shotguns and short-barreled rifles and machine guns and things like that. So here are just a couple of sections as it relates to firearms, and we'll kind of look at a few more that are a little bit different before we get into some of the really kind of simplistic things. And you can find a lot of these on page 147, but these are disguised appearance firearms, or possessing a firearm with a altered serial number, so which is obviously against the law under Penal Code 537E and 23.920. Any type of unconventional pistol, a zip gun, an imitation firearm, okay, a cane gun, a wallet gun, a undetectable firearm. All of these are, kind of listed in here for a specific reason. So let's go back to the imitation one, because that's kind of an interesting one. So an imitation firearm is a toy or replica that is so similar to a real firearm that a reasonable person might perceive it to be real, except those who are those that are white or a bright color or are translucent, and their contents are discernible. So that's possession of a imitation firearm. And there's the imitation firearm offenses. So it is a misdemeanor to alter an imitation firearm to make it look real. Openly displaying or exposing an imitation firearm in a public place is an infraction, first or second offense, or a misdemeanor for third and subsequent offense. So, these are things that are, again, you'll see in law enforcement, and they might sound kind of weird right now, but they won't later on. So now we're going to move into carrying firearms, and we're going to talk specifically more about possessing like handguns and what you can have and what you can't have and what have you. So the first one we're going to start off with is being armed while masked. I'm sure you can understand why there's a section for that. Penal Code 25.300. It is unlawful to possess a firearm in a public place while wearing a mask. Carrying a concealed weapon, Penal Code 25.400 subsection A, talks about a person who carries a concealed upon his or her person, or who carries or causes to be carried concealed in a vehicle under his or her control, or in which he or she is an occupant, any pistol, revolver, or other firearm capable of being concealed upon the person is guilty of carrying a concealed firearm. Depending upon the circumstances and the person's criminal history, the offense may be a misdemeanor or a jail wobbler. Okay, so carry carried concealed upon the person or in a vehicle is a crime. Concealed can mean found in an unlocked gun case. Penal Code 26-350 subsection A2 makes it a crime to carry an exposed unloaded handgun inside a vehicle in public, but there are some exceptions. Firearms carried openly in belt holsters are not concealed. Okay, so this just tells you about that. Now, you're not allowed to carry a loaded firearm open in a public place. We don't have open carry here in California, and I'll tell you what that means in a little bit. And I'm actually going to post a video on open carry so you can see what I'm talking about. But simply, the definition here, 25400C, firearms carried openly in a belt holster are not considered concealed. Police chiefs, sheriffs may issue permits for those to carry concealed weapons. So let's have a little discussion here before we kind of move on to the next slide. A gun carried on the person or in a vehicle is concealed in violation of this section if it is inside of an unlocked gun case. So there's a couple case laws on that, and I wanted to make sure that you kind of got that squared away and we're on track. This section does not prohibit carrying a concealable firearm on the seat of a car as long as the weapon is exposed to plain view and is not covered or hidden. Okay, however, section 26-350A2 makes it a misdemeanor to carry an exposed unloaded handgun inside a vehicle in public. So again, a lot of little nuances that are kind of built into a lot of these different sections, and that's why you have to read them very, very carefully. So now let's look at the carrying a loaded firearm, and we'll kind of move into a couple of different areas here. So carrying a loaded firearm, a person who carries a loaded firearm on the person or in a vehicle in a public place or on any public street in any incorporated city or the prohibited area of unincorporated territory is guilty of carrying a loaded firearm. Depending upon the circumstances and the person's criminal history, the offense may be a misdemeanor or a jail wobbler. Now, numerous exemptions include carrying a loaded firearm while hunting in approved areas, or based on a reasonable perception that personal safety is threatened. So, kind of keep those in mind. So there are a couple of exceptions. If a peace officer has reasonable cause to believe that a person may be armed with a firearm or other deadly weapon in violation of any law, the officer may detain that person to determine whether a violation is being committed and may conduct a limited safety search for other weapons. Okay, so for this section, okay, for purposes of this section, a firearm is loaded only if there is an unexpended cartridge or shell in or attached in any manner to the firearm in such a way that it could be fired, including in the firing chamber or in the magazine or clip inserted in the firearm. Even though there may not be a round chambered beneath the firing pin, the weapon would still be loaded if unexpended ammunition is in the cylinder of a revolver or in the inserted clip or magazine of an automatic or semi-automatic firearm. However, for purposes of this section, unlike some others, a firearm is not loaded, okay, merely because the person has an unloaded firearm and matching ammunition in his or her possession. If the ammunition is not somehow in or attached to the weapon in such a way that it is ready or could be chambered and fired by the pull of the trigger or operation of a slide or other charging mechanism. So that kind of clears it up. So carrying a loaded firearm on the person or in a vehicle in a public place or on a public street, some of the exceptions I just read to you. Officers may detain people and inspect weapons under 25850B. A firearm is is loaded even if the weapon is not chambered, but if it's in the clip or in the cylinder. A firearm is not loaded if ammo is only in the immediate possession. Okay, and then there are sections for allowing another person to carry a firearm, and also carrying an unloaded handgun in a public place. So you have these different sections for us to look at. So we know about we probably know about those who are allowed to carry firearms. Let's talk a little bit about those that aren't. There are some sections that basically prohibit those from carrying weapons, restricted possession, if you will. So possession by minors. A minor under 18 may not possess a firearm. There are some exceptions found in the code sections listed before you. Also, any felon or addict, narcotics addict, in possession of a firearm is a violation of 29,800 or 29,900. So give you a little bit more information on the felon and or addict. It is a prison felony for a person who is addicted to any narcotic, or any person who has been convicted of a felony in state court or specified federal court cases to have any firearm in his or her possession or control. The same prohibition applies to persons who have been convicted 2 or more times violating Penal Code Section 417A2, which is exhibiting a firearm in a rude, angry, or threatening manner. So you can't have those. Probation violations also, so possessing any type of firearm, probation, parole, a person who is on either of those terms could have a violation placed upon them for possessing a weapon, and also restraining order violations, which is kind of an interesting thing. So if you are the subject of a restraining order, and under section 29.825, you may be basically told that you cannot possess a weapon as part of this restraining orders, as part of the restraining order. And sometimes you may even run into a situation where law enforcement, peace officers, may be the subject of a restraining order, but they can petition the court for relief from this restriction, because carrying a firearm would be part of their job, but that would be up for the court to basically decide whether or not they could possess that weapon or not under the terms of the court order. So prohibited weapons, a little bit of constitutionality here. The Second Amendment talks about a well-regulated militia being necessary to keep the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. Now, that means, and it was built more or less for for your home. Okay, so when they talked about secure, keep and bear arms was for defense of your home. Just because we have the Second Amendment doesn't mean that you can just kind of walk around with a loaded firearm or a concealed firearm. So these are things that we have to kind of consider as well. So while we have the Second Amendment, there are state laws, okay, that regulate a lot of things when it comes to dangerous weapons and firearms. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court said the Second Amendment protects a person's right to own or possess firearms within one's residence, which is kind of what I was talking about a minute ago. Case law notes that the Second Amendment does not affect states from making laws regulating firearms under certain circumstances. So again, states can make certain laws to allow certain things, and that's why some gun laws may be different from East Coast to even Central or even West Coast. And the federal government still has the right to regulate some firearms like machine guns and sawed-off shotguns and things like that. So, what is possession? And this is always, kind of a question that comes around as well. Did I really possess this firearm, or how do you prove possession or whatever? So the law recognizes two kinds of possession. So actual possession, meaning like direct physical control over an item, or what they call constructive possession, which is no actual possession, but knowingly has the right of control over an item, kind of like dominion and control. And the law recognizes that one person may have possession alone, or two or more persons jointly may share actual or constructive possession. So kind of an interesting thought when you're talking about possession. I mean, what about gang members that decide to go out and do a drive-by, and they have one gun in the car, but there's 3 gang members in there, and maybe the gun's in the front seat where 2 of the gang members are sitting. So I mean, these are just, again, issues of law that we have to kind of understand. And then finally, as I finish up here, open carry. I'm going to post a video about open carry, and that's basically the individuals that are going around. And there are some states that have open carry, like Arizona, for one that I can just kind of think of right off the bat, where you can carry a loaded firearm in a public place, and it's okay because those are the laws that are there. Now in California, law enforcement is being tested quite often with those that are showing up and even calling law enforcement to respond to a call and videotaping them as they come out, while these people have loaded firearms in a public place. So you have to know the laws, you have to know what you can work with. There are certain constitutional rights that individuals have, and again, some of these laws are simply changing as legislature makes changes based on people's wants and thoughts, and even what maybe even other states are doing. So I'll post a video on that open carry, and you can kind of take a look at it, and then we'll have possibly a discussion, or at least you'll have some better information on it. So that's going to kind of end this particular chapter, chapter 9, talking about dangerous weapons and control laws. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them on the discussion board, and please take the time to go through especially this chapter and look at some of the smaller sections in there, the parts that break down all of the weaponry that's listed under, say, firearms, or everything that's listed under less lethal, or clubs or knives or whatever, because there are a lot of things that we didn't cover today because we kind of wanted to hit those big ticket items. So with that, more to come, and until next time, that will be it.